So that's why we haven't really gotten started yet. Hopefully it'll be about 15-20 minutes. So just so everybody knows. Sorry about that. I apologize.
Brilliant. That was a great little town. No, well, Allen. This is the high school, bro. Come on. That's the craziest football field I've ever seen. And I was talking to Professor Turner. I went out for during the day, of course, all the one that just came out. It's all I wanted to do. Like, you got, like, some of the greatest physical guys that are in out. So we had 4 days, and went by high school, and a friend of ours, and he was throwing us into that's out there. That sounds like a good one. You know? He's like, you might go down and see McKinney. That's crazy. You son of a baby. $60 million high school. I guess Kyler Murray is
Sorry about that.
And the reason we did they signed a deal with PGA Tour. So it ties back into yeah. It's 3 quarters, right? And we were on the 3rd quarter. Now the only you sit in our seat, which one you want to do, and you kind of lose some right. It's true. They would have put that on glass. Like the glass or something. We're going to watch that. But the food's amazing. You're right behind you. It's unreal. Yeah, that's the shirt. Yeah. What you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. And then, you're supposed to sit down in the first row. Right? Next, put it on next to one hour, or great. Yeah. Well, do they
You can sit a remote camera there.
They actually put cameras on the and they show holes on the 6 They put 6 cameras on you're like sneaking in the bunker. But it's unbelievable. That's in the small. Yeah, that's actually, I heard that. I watch it.
Yeah, I watched the season.
My daddy's really CGL. I would like to go back.
No.
He used to work on the DJ Plus. Now he's kind
State. Is she a CPA?
We're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot more not all of them. People looking for I mean, I'm getting great deals for buyers. Yes, that was really like a case of their situation. Yeah. Why it's all closed. Yeah. Getting that. What you get a little get some insurance or two. So, they leveled off right now. Insurance rates in the next probably 12 months. Because everyone else in the state has double digit increases. We have increases, or I mean, everyone in the country, rather, every other state. Our increases are basically less than 1% right now. Some policies are showing reductions. Insurance rates are becoming down 8 to 10. My insurance policy went down 30%. So this is one way. Like my wife. I'm a state senator. You know, I got pissed off. So now,
every holiday, and experience, and so.
So you know, people aren't school board members like that. So what's so Jackson Beach part of Greater Jacksonville? So you I'm involved in a lot of firefighters. Yeah, those guys have, I tested it years ago that gave cancer coverage for firefighters. So they did that. Pretty crazy. And I mean, firefighters, they're a rare breed in the fact that they're fighting fires and everything's being applied. So they're inhaling it. They wind up with cancers that might show up in firefighters at a much higher rate. And in counties where covering it in their plans. But in workers' comp, it's like, you guys crazy. Yeah, I got a construction not mostly, about half of the time. Yeah, I'm usually from like 7:30 in the morning up until 11, and I do it while I work out and shit like that. Then I'm in the office at like 2 to 4.
So the stuff that's going to do this or something.
A lot of
Just talking in your
pretty much. That's what I do.
It's like me.
Yeah.
People think I'm crazy at this sometimes, because sometimes it's like,
I think you're talking to
a
yourself.
construction guy, I'm talking to a client and stuff. We're like, funny is it was like a talking to her. She's back to my
But that makes her even more interested because you've already been interested in that.
No, but it's probably I was probably.
We just went out there.
Yeah.
That's when it happens.
It's ways.
See how you're relaxing. I'm sorry.
I know we did a mic check, everybody was good, right? You guys are all good?
Yeah.
Okay. If everybody else could silence your cell phones, please, that would be great. And then if the governor does take questions at the end, that is just for the press. Just like to let everybody know. Thank you.
Look at this, just kind of cool look.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we went
Right here, so there, back up.
Did y'all just do the US side?
No, we couldn't, I could cross, but couldn't cross. Driver's license don't work anymore. You could cross. And then, it is what it is. He is the first agreement, CIO, so it's key bank agreement. So the next silver ruins from the key bank suite.
Yeah.
We went to Buffalo. So Buffalo's small business. But yeah, I'll look forward. I'm from actually Western Mass, about an hour west. Oh yeah? What's she doing?
She's a DJ.
Okay. Gotcha. How about what's up with that? See, Shaq. This was balls. Obviously, that's the campus of it. Well, that's what she did. She put his hand out and said, "I want to put my hand in." This is a wall. So it's like the special it's like a regular wall. Cover. And it's like white supposed to be thin, it's not supposed to be. Then we watched the
Yeah.
that was semi-final. We went to the Spanish Buffalo Casino before the Bruins game. So I walked in. Good.
You guys.
It's awesome. Yeah. I just called it and go to one more tournaments or whatever. Well, depends on the shoes. Right. Minimum one aggressive. Now, they were single, they could be fine. It was 40 big cards. So, yeah. What's that? Then you've got Bruce. I don't actually. Push that like Bruce. You know? So, yeah. Yeah. I'm on the phone. After that, I'm not playing like 5. Yeah. Yeah.
And then eventually,
We were kids.
You'll be fine. You're a manager. Amanda's responsive. You have to so when we're done here, there's food. I'm not being and I want to only the only one I want was it second to make the playoffs and 5. Terrell was like 1-1. It was a 1-1 and it made me money. Yeah. We have a challenge. So it's 20 teams. Bottom 3 get relegated. Top 3 get promoted. And so everybody puts in top division teams.
And you get relegated and then kicked out.
I was the number one overall seed in all class.
Ours is very winner take all. So there's no consolation second place, third place. Which is his mom. It's like, it's Kevin Costner drafted. He went in with his 7th pick overall in the middle of 2 ones. You know? And a bump turn. Well, David Buddy. Yeah, just. 30 seconds.
30 seconds ago.
I didn't want to trick you, that's why I don't. All tapped in. Or you want a separate connection? I can always go with you. Go on one and then another one. Whatever this is, right? I was wondering if this is so. We'll hold on. See how long we go. I'll take you out.
Those 4 got to go back and drink together when it comes to minor things.
All righty. Good morning. Well, it's great to be back in Jacksonville. It's great to be back on the west side of town, and we want to thank everybody for being here. We got a discussion that needs to happen in this state about providing property tax relief for Floridians. We've got, if you think about how we're governed, we're ranked #1 economy in the country 2 years in a row by both CNBC and U.S. News and World Report. We're ranked #1 in higher education. We've been ranked either #1 or #2 in education for the last several years. #1 in education freedom, #1 in parent involvement in education. Crime rate is at a 50-year low. If you look at yet we're doing a lot of big things to help. I'll talk in a minute. But if you look at Florida's budget, we have millions of more people than New York does, and yet our budget is less than half the size of New York State. If you look at all the debt that the state of Florida accumulated over 180 years of its existence, just since I've been governor, we've retired 41% of that, and we have the lowest per capita debt in the entire United States amongst all 50 states. As a Floridian, your share of our state debt is about $400. As an American, your share of the national debt is $105,000 per citizen, and unfortunately, that is going up. So we're doing right. And if you look at the size of state government, we have the lowest number of state employees per capita in the entire United States of America, and yet within that framework, I mean, do you think that New York has better roads, schools, or services than we do? Of course not. If you look at what we've done just since I've been governor, we've done record-breaking support for transportation and infrastructure and roads and ports and all the things that are really important, particularly for a growing state. In fact, we've put billions and billions of dollars additional to front load a lot of projects that weren't even scheduled to be completed or even started till next decade. Some of these things are going to be completed 15 years ahead of schedule. If you look at what we've done for conservation, we established the Florida Wildlife Corridor. We've done Everglades restoration. We've done things for springs that no one thought was possible 5 or 6 years ago. And then if you look at education, we have universal school choice. We've done billions of dollars in increases for teacher salaries. We have the highest per pupil spending that we've ever had. Now that in and of itself, because you go look around the country, some of the places that have the worst results have massive high per pupil. It's a question of, is that going to bureaucracy and red tape, or is it actually making a difference with personnel and in the classroom? And we've really worked hard for the latter. So even as we're paying off debt, cutting billions of dollars in taxes, which we've done over the last 6 years, running big surpluses. We've quadrupled the state's rainy day fund just since I've been governor. We're close to quadrupling it. That's not happening in many of these other states. So we're doing a lot of big things that I think people want to see the state do, while at the same time really maintaining something that is working very well. And I'm proud of that. And I'm proud that we don't have an income tax. And as long as I have anything to say about it, that will never happen in Florida. I'm also proud we've been able to cut a lot of taxes. But the #1 thing in terms of tax is that people talk about is what's happened with property taxes. If you go back 5 or 6 years ago, Florida was fine. But when COVID hit, we were open. Some of these states were closed. People flooded down here, and you had massive spike in real estate values, and which, on the one hand, like you have your home, that's your #1 asset for many people, and if you bought it for $250,000 10 years ago, then all of a sudden over a 5-year period it triples in value. That for you is an asset if you eventually sell it, that you would realize, but with the increase in values as people are buying homes in particular, you have higher tax basis to pay property taxes. And sometimes, you have a homestead is great, but the homestead is limited in terms of how much benefits you get. And so your property goes up 3 times. You're paying more, no question about it. Then if you have to buy a new home because maybe your family's growing, maybe your job took you to a different city, you're locked in at a much higher tax basis right there, and that's really tough. And so it's like, you have people, the median home price is $400-some thousand, but the median income is like $75,000, $85,000 for a family. And so how does it work where you're having to pay 10 grand a year just in property taxes? And the thing about it is, this is supposed to be your private property, but yet you could own your home for 50 years and you still got to pay the government just to live on your property. I mean, at some point, when do you own your property free and clear, or are you just always going to be paying rent to the government? So I think there's a philosophical debate that we need to have about property tax, but there's also just the practical debate, and this is not limited to Florida. If you look around the country, probably most of the people in this room, when you bought your first home, and if you did a residential mortgage, you'd look, and most of the money you would pay monthly would go to the principal and interest on the mortgage. Then you'd have some for insurance and some for taxes, but the principal and interest was always the biggest. Now, it's pretty standard across the country that the insurance plus principal and interest is more than what the taxes plus principal and interest are more than what you pay on the balance of your home. You're paying tax, you're paying insurance, and then principal and interest is less than those two combined. And so this is difficult for people. So the tax, we can't control the value of homes in the government. You wouldn't want us to try to do that. It wouldn't work. Insurance, we've done a lot of reforms. The market is stabilized. More companies are coming in. But that's very, very tricky when you've got 6 major hurricanes in 7 years. Our market is the most challenging in the country. Government can't just set a rate. If I could just say you pay $1 a month, I would do that, right? But we know that everything would collapse. It's just not, it's a private market. But the tax is purely about government, right? Government can tax or not tax. We in Florida have the opportunity, even though this is a local issue mostly, to do constitutional protections. There are things we can do in Tallahassee working with the legislature, but I think it's just, you get locked in. You should not be in a situation where you'd ever have to give up your home because you can't afford the taxes. So I'm glad that we're here. We've got some great folks. We've got Senator Blaise Ngolia, who represents a district north of Tampa Bay. Jordan Hooten is a realtor here in Jacksonville. Janelle Flynn is a local resident who's going to talk about this. But I just think that when you're looking at what can you do to, one, further the free state of Florida, 2, what makes the most difference for Florida residents? When I became governor, it was typical that we'd get between 80 and 90 million visitors a year. That changed a lot over the last 6 years. Last year, we had 142 million visitors to this state. And you see it on the roads, you see it. I mean, there's some burdens that come with that. But, we're fortunate that they pay tax for us. They pay these sales taxes, they pay hotel taxes, they do all that. Florida First means I want that 142 million and the snowbirds who live here part-time but aren't residents, the Canadians and all that. I want them to shoulder as much of the burden as possible. I want to relieve burden on Florida residents. We are unique in this country in being able to do that even more so than we've done historically, and that would be a really, really good thing for so many families across the state of Florida. So this is something that when I said a couple months ago, we want to do, obviously there's some things we can do at the state level, but structurally, if you look at Florida's constitution, this is a local, so your millage rate is not set by the state. What they do with the revenues coming in is done usually with city and county. But we have the ability, working with the legislature, to put initiatives on the ballot that will be able to allow you to vote for relief and for protection in this area. And I think it could be really, really exciting. But we need to have this debate. All your representatives need to know that this is something that you want to see, that it would make the state better. I think the economy would boom tremendously if we were able to do this, and it would really help people cope with we've seen a big increase in cost of living with all the inflation that's happened in the economy over the last 3-4 years. We don't know what's going to happen with that. You look at, home values can kind of fluctuate. We've seen booms in markets, but then there's a correction, but who knows, right? You just don't know with all this stuff. And home ownership, I don't believe in like some of the programs the federal government did to like try to manufacture loans for people that couldn't afford to pay the loans. I think that led to some problems in the first decade of this century with the financial crisis and some of these mortgage-backed securities that were really built off a lot of bogus loans that should have never been issued. But at the same time, owning a home is a key portion of the American dream. We can't try to subsidize a loan or try to act like, we can get you a mortgage when you can't afford it. But what we can do is say, when you're doing that, when you're working hard, we want to relieve burdens on you. We don't want you to be burdened down with having to pay all this tax, especially when we can collect that tax for people that don't even live here. And that to me would be a much better way to go about it. So I'm excited about the prospects of bringing some significant relief. It's all about Florida focus on our residents, put our residents first. And while we appreciate people that come and visit here, I don't want to be cutting their taxes. I want to be cutting your taxes. Okay, Blaise Angolia.
I'm sure the clapping was for him, not for me, but I appreciate that. Governor, I want to thank you for leading on this issue. You've been ahead on a lot of issues. This is just another one. Look, one of the reasons why the governor is proposing this and is talking about property tax relief is because he travels the state. He talks to a lot of people and he hears directly from his constituents that property taxes are an issue. I'm going to give you a little bit of background here. So in the last 5 years alone, local governments have taken in so much property tax revenue that their local budgets have increased anywhere between 60 to 120%. I moved here from New York City, and as a lot of people move from northern states, fleeing lockdown states, they come down to the state of Florida because we are the free state of Florida. One of the reasons why they move out of those areas is because of high taxes. But now we're starting to get to the point here where our local governments, by not fixing their millage rate, not cutting their budgets, they just keep on collecting all of this tax revenue. We always say, don't New York our Florida, and we have to say this to our local governments. So just so everyone understands the context and why this is an important issue and why the governor has latched on to this issue, let's go through a little bit of the history of homestead in the state of Florida. We used to have a $25,000 homestead exemption. When that was originally enacted, that represented about 33% of your value of your home. So 33% was shielded from taxation. So in the 2000s, we saw an increase in property tax, increase in home sales, increase in property values, and a corresponding increase in taxes. And the legislature's property taxes, the legislature's response was to give an additional homestead exemption. So what we have right now is the original $25,000 is exempt, the next $25,000 is taxed, and the next $25,000 after that is exempt, but we hold the school board portion of those property taxes exempt from that taxation. So when you blend it all together, it's about $39,000 is what your current homestead exemption is. Years ago, it was 33%. With the $39,000 property homestead exemption, it represents about 9%. So there's really no efficient way of shielding people from property taxes, but for property tax reform, and that's what the governor is proposing. Right now, he's proposing a two-step program. One is to give people rebates off of their taxes right now and send rebate checks for people who've already sent in their tax bill, and that is just to bide the time until 2026 so we can put a constitutional amendment on the ballot and offer people substantial tax exemptions, property tax, homestead exemptions. Because without that, governments are going to continue to grow. Unless an outside force comes in, and this, you guys, the voters would be the outside force, says stop spending, they will continue to spend, they will continue to grow their budget. So, Governor, I applaud you and I thank you for, again, leading on an issue that all of our constituents want. We talked about this the other day. I did some town halls, some speaking at some events in my district, in the villages and in Hernando County. About 300 people there. When I asked them to raise their hand who wanted property tax relief, almost every single one did. So thank you for leading on this issue, Governor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, Jordan, floor is yours.
Now, he brought up a lot of the points that that I kind of put in my notes to talk about today. When you're going to qualify for a loan, you know they're calculating your mortgage rate. Well, your mortgage, what you can afford is based on your income, and you can qualify based on a percentage of your income. But that rate, which we know interest rates are high right now, it's factored with property taxes, high insurance rate, and your mortgage rate. So it's, you know, disqualifying people that would otherwise be able to buy that property. So you're eliminating people that could potentially otherwise buy. So that's for the standard home buyer. And then, I mean, even with people that aren't homeowners, it actually affects, because if there's, you know, if there's an investor that has a property that, let's say the bill goes from $5,000 to $10,000, he's going to pass that expense on to the tenant. You know, so you got people that are living paycheck to paycheck that now their rent has to go up because the person that owns that property is not going to become unprofitable. So he's got to pass that along to the tenant, and now they got to pay a higher rent. So it's affecting them as well.
Okay, Janelle Flynn.
Yes, hello, good morning. I'm a longtime resident here of Jacksonville, Florida, born and raised. A number of years ago, I found myself in a divorce situation and had to move out of the home I had lived in for 18 years. Rented from 2015 and then had the opportunity to purchase my home in 22. At the age of 62. So I'm very proud of being a homeowner here in Jacksonville. But with the income that I do have coming in and all these taxes that are presented to me, it's very hard to maintain a lifestyle that you would like to lead. So I think the governor, what he's proposing is a wonderful thing. And I got my JEA bill in the other day, and I'm kind of terrified to open it. So if anything you can do to help, especially the senior citizens here in this state with property taxes, would definitely most be helpful to us. And thank you for your leadership here in Florida, and thank you for caring about the citizens of the state of Florida.
Absolutely. What's the real estate market look like here in Northeast Florida right now?
It's been a little slower at the beginning of the year. You're starting to see it pick up a little bit for sure.
And is that pretty much just following the interest rate, or what do you think?
I think part of it's just seasonal,
Yeah.
right? The beginning of the year is always a little slower, and as you kick into spring and summer, it starts to pick up a little bit.
Okay. And you live in what part of town?
I live on the north side out by the zoo on Trout River.
Oh, okay. And Blaze, and just in terms of overall, I know you're involved in home building. What are you seeing with the economy in Florida? Obviously, we hear these things the media talks about nationally, and then I'm always asking people, well, are you doing poorly? And they're like, no, we're doing good. But it's like, it's anecdote.
Yeah, well, and thanks to your leadership and good long-term conservative leadership in the state of Florida, we're always situated better, right? No state income tax. The state is fiscally responsible. It is easy to open up a business here. So the state is in a much better situation, but specifically to real estate and property taxes, we are seeing a little bit of slowing. And some of those are macro issues, and to your point, some of those macroeconomic issues, and some of those are issues where local governments are refusing to cut property taxes. So from a builder's standpoint, I do see people who try to qualify for homes, and then they see what the amount will be with their property taxes, and they're like, I'm sorry, we can't afford this, and they're usually either downsizing or they just don't become homeowners.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about it is we obviously did much better in COVID than other states did. We have our economy's grown more than every state in the country since I became governor, except Idaho, barely beat us, but they have like 2 million people, so it's a lot easier to grow at a higher percentage when you're that small. We're in a different situation. And so we're really well situated to withstand whatever happens, but if you do have issues that happen, I mean, clearly we got hit with the inflation like every other state. I mean, when the federal government is borrowing and printing trillions of dollars, you are going to have inflation. I mean, it's just that simple. When you shut down supply chains like they did during COVID, that is going to cause disruptions. And so there's no way to avoid that, but we handled that better. And now you hear all these different things, the media is talking about recession, all this other stuff, and like, look, I don't know, but I do know we will weather it better than other states because we've made a lot of good decisions over the years. I mean, just think about rainy day fund. When I became governor, the rainy day fund was about $1.6 billion. Now it's close to $5 billion. And so, during the Great Recession, the legislature, and Blaze wasn't there yet, but and I wasn't around, but they even raised taxes because of the shortfall. They had like a $1 or $2 billion, $3 billion shortfall, something like that. Now, I'm not saying that'll happen in Florida, but when you have a rainy day fund, you simply that's when you use the rainy day fund, right? So we're well positioned to be able to handle whatever comes our way. But I do think just preserving the viability of the American dream, making sure people can actually own their homes free and clear, and not being in a situation where somebody just can't afford to keep paying taxes and could potentially lose their property. I mean, if we can get to that point where people are able to prosper under those circumstances, I think it'll be really, really good for the state of Florida. So we've got a lot of work to do over the next, particularly 9 months as we get into next year and where this would ripen to be put on the ballot. But I think we're going to have an opportunity to give Floridians with a really, really great choice to make sure that the free state of Florida continues to live up to its reputation. Okay, any questions back there?
I do have a question about the allegedly illegal gun registry here in the city of Jacksonville. Should and could the mayor possibly face any consequences for this taking place under her nose for close to 2 years?
Having a gun registry is unlawful, and it is a violation of people's Second Amendment rights. There needs to be consequences for it, and I was surprised to see that would happen, but our laws in Florida are very clear. Our Constitution is very clear. Doing these secret gun registries is completely unacceptable, and I know you have Republicans on the city council that are pursuing this, and I know others will likely pursue, but there will need to be accountability, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Governor, should long-term homeowners eventually stop paying property tax entirely, or is some level of ongoing tax paid?
No, you should own your property free and clear. I think to say that someone that's been in their house for 35 years just has to keep ponying up money, that is not. You don't own your home if that's the case. So yes, of course, I'd like to see people be able to owe free and clear. And it's interesting because it's like if I go to Best Buy and buy a flat screen TV and put it on the wall, I got to pay a sales tax on it, right? But I don't keep paying tax on it every year. I mean, it's just not. That's not how we do things. It's like, okay, if you're going to tax something, you tax it at the transaction, and then let people actually enjoy their private property free and clear of the government. So that, I think, is the vision. That's the philosophical insight. And if you think about our founding fathers, when they were proposing the Constitution, in one of the Federalist Papers, I think it was Hamilton, he's writing about, because there was opposition to the Constitution. They were making a more powerful federal government than under the Articles of Confederation, and people worried about taxation. And they didn't have, obviously, a 16th Amendment, which eventually came on income tax, but basically you were not effectively allowed to do any direct taxation. It had to be indirect, meaning you couldn't just, you could theoretically just apply like a tax on land federally, but it'd have to be a portion among the states, so practically it could never work. So basically, Hamilton's saying, look, the indirect taxes are the most effective, efficient way to raise revenue for the government, because they basically allow the individual to choose how much tax they want to pay based on how much they're consuming. And there's a security, there's a protection against excessive tax in that regard, because if the government raises consumption tax too much, it kills the golden goose, because then it causes people to stop purchasing as much. But he said taxing property is one of the worst forms of taxation, because people don't have a choice in the matter, and you're just basically drilling these folks over and over again on tax. And so it's an issue that I think's pinched a lot of people, but philosophically, it was not the way that that the federal government was constructed. Now, I understand local, there was a history of it, and that's kind of been the norm. But man, I mean, you talk about family of four having the median home price that is purchased in Florida. You know, that's a pretty hefty tax bill right there when you come in after buying a home. When you consider what the average income is throughout the United States of America, the math just doesn't add up, and I think that's why people want relief.
Governor, do you have a timeline of what those the tax rebate checks, if that could possibly go out? What does that look like?
Well, our proposal was they would go out when the notices went out in November. So you'd get the notice, and then you'd get the rebate as well. And I actually had some of these Republicans in the leadership of the Florida House say that giving people a rebate on property taxes they are currently paying is the akin to like Gavin Newsom welfare program. What has happened to some of these people in the Republican Party that they would equate rebating taxes you have paid to somebody just getting a handout for doing nothing? But that's kind of the level that you've seen, unfortunately, take place in the Florida House of Representatives. And I don't know, I don't know if it's something in the water up there, but we've been the most successful state in the country for the last 6 years. Obviously, the #1 rankings in so many things, #1 in people moving here. Other Republican states, elected officials have come to Florida to learn about the different things that we're doing across a whole variety of different issues. And yet you have the leadership there, they're trying to undo what we've done. They got elected running on our Florida First agenda, and then they're utilizing their power to sabotage that agenda. They did not get, first of all, they wouldn't have had a supermajority at all if it wasn't for me in 22. Let's just be clear about that. They would not have even come close to getting that. And so what have they done? Beginning of the year, I called a special session. I said President Trump's taking office. His #1 promise was immigration enforcement and deportations. You can't do that with just federal resources, given what Biden did. The state and local need to be on the team. So I called a special session. We had the strongest immigration enforcement package in the country. The leadership in the House rejected it. They said it was premature. They attacked me for proposing it. They got a lot of blowback from the constituents on that one. And so then they said, okay, well, we'll do one, but we're not going to do what the governor wants. So they did this piece of legislation, and they thought that voters would be dumb enough that if they just called it the Trump Act, that you wouldn't realize that it was actually going to make Florida a de facto sanctuary state. It eliminated all the current immigration enforcement we're already doing, and that we even did under Biden. They eliminated that. They eliminated the governor from having any ability to enforce immigration law at all or work with the. Why would they do that? They did it because this is what they do, right? And so they got backlash on that. So we finally got it across the finish line. And now, if you look, of all the agencies, law enforcement agencies in the country, there's hundreds of them that have agreements with ICE for immigration enforcement. More than half of them are in Florida. In the entire country, more than half of that. That would not have happened had the leadership in the House got their way and killed immigration enforcement, and certainly if they were able to get away with making Florida a de facto sanctuary state. What else have they done? We've worked hard to do tort reform and litigation reform, because you could look at any metric Floridians pay more for things as a result of our lawsuit culture. And we had one of the worst lawsuit cultures. And it's like, look, if someone harms you, you have every right to go in. But what happens is these guys will sue everybody and just see what sticks. But even if you're 100% innocent, if someone sues you, it's expensive to be able to defend. And so you're able to manipulate the system and then extort settlements. And it causes costs to go up, insurance rates, prices, all that stuff. So we did major reforms. And since you've done major reforms, last year, after many years of increase, property insurance was stable. So far this year, the rates are stable. Auto insurance in Florida, this year, the major carriers' average decrease is 5%. It's not decreasing anywhere else. The only reason that's happening is because of the litigation reform. Well, the House of Representatives, the leadership, they didn't run on this, but they actually tried to repeal these reforms. And their own analysis in the bill said it would have caused insurance rates to go up 50%. Why would they do that? They didn't campaign on it. Well, it would benefit a lot of lawyers, and they're trying to benefit the lawyer class. That is not what they ran on. And then you look at higher education. We've really worked hard in Florida to say our universities, there's no place for woke indoctrination. We want classical education. We were the first state in the country to eliminate DEI from our public universities. Like now, it's on the defensive. I think the Trump administration's done admirable work to go against it, and now corporate America and the universities are backtracking. When we leaned in against DEI, we were going against the tide. I mean, it was sweeping academia, corporate America. We dug in and we fought back on that. We have in Florida, all tenured professors have to undergo review every 5 years and can be terminated for poor performance. I mean, so many of these professors, they get tenure, and rather than do research and teaching, they want to do political activism. Well, look, if that's what you want, go to Berkeley. We don't want that here on your dime, right? So we've done a lot to really draw a contrast with the Columbia universities and the Harvards in terms of their campus culture, their ideological extremism, and saying, you know what, parents, you're going to get a very rigorous, high-quality education, but it's going to be divorced from the woke agenda. And that's been very positive for us. And yet, the House of Representatives leadership put forth a bill that the House passed, it died in the Senate, to undo our anti-woke education reforms effectively. And I'm just thinking to myself, did any of these guys campaign on that? Is that what they told you they were going to do when they got in? And so I think you've had a lot of problems with truth in advertising here. When you run on a certain agenda and then you turn around and sabotage, that's committing a fraud against the voters that put you there. They assumed power based on the good work of other people, not them. And they've assumed this power and this leadership, and they're weaponizing that against the voters that sent us there in the first place. And that's why they've had trouble. That's why it's been an ineffective run for them. They don't even have a budget. I mean, literally, the session ended. Since I've been governor, sometimes it goes a day or two to tie up the loose ends. They don't even have an agreement on what the level should be. They're not even close to any of this stuff. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, you had a pretty good blueprint on how to just do effective conservative governance. And Blaze and a lot of his colleagues in the Senate, have, I think, worked to continue the success. But for whatever reason, these guys, in the leadership in the House, they just decided, that they're going to, try to pursue this really, I think, it's like a foreign agenda to Florida in terms of Republicans and what we've done. This is not anything that people have been talking about. So let's make sure that you're informing your representatives that they need to be on your side. They need to be putting Floridians first. They need to be supporting conservative policy. They need to be supporting property tax relief, and particularly when that comes time to put it on the ballot. Now's the time to really, and I just think that the sense I get when people find out, because a lot of people don't follow what's going on in Tallahassee, and there's a lot of other stuff going on, and there's obviously a lot of stuff going on in Washington. And so a lot of times, but when they do see, they're almost floored that this could be going on. They're just like, what? what the heck? Who do these people think they are? But the more you tell people, they're like, okay. And I think the issue is so many people just thought Florida was on autopilot, like we're this like super red state, don't worry about it, all this. But it's like you have the biggest majorities in the Florida House we've ever had for Republicans, and yet the agenda has really been, they've been more interested in throwing a lifeline to the left and attacking me than they have been in doing the work that you sent them there to do. So that's just wrong. That's not the way you do business. And but ultimately, the people have the power to make sure this all gets right.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what the governor says, because this is a little frustrating. I'm a member of the Senate, and I will say that there's a lot of people in the Senate who agree with the governor's positions, but we have a supermajority in the legislature. I mean, it is an overwhelming supermajority, and that is a mandate to not only continue to do what we're doing, but I would argue to put their foot on the gas and keep on doing it. And what a lot of the policies that we see trying to get through that we do not agree with is trying to undo all of the work that we've already done. So I don't understand. There's a reason why everyone wants to move to the state of Florida. There's a reason why when I'm in a cab in another part of the country, and they ask me where I'm from, and I say I'm from Florida, it's like, oh, you got Ron DeSantis as your guy. There's a reason for that. So why we're trying to undo that, I don't understand. And another thing that I just don't understand is, like, we are the supermajority. That means our ideological opposition is in the super minority. I mean, why are we taking and copying, pasting some of the stuff that the supermajority is doing, then regurgitating it as talking points against the agenda that all Floridians want? I just don't get it. It's very, very frustrating.
Well, so the House, because I wanted property tax, the leadership, said, no, they're not going to do it. But I think a lot of citizens were like, well, why? Why not, right? So the last day of the session, they convene a 37-person committee on property tax. And so first of all, like, if you want to actually get something done, you wouldn't do a 37-person committee. You do a 37-person committee when you're trying to stop something from getting done. Let's just be clear about that. But put that aside, they stack the committee with very leftist Democrats. So you have basically this party is dead across the state of Florida. They have almost a 3-to-1 Republican majority. Why are you putting people on the committee who don't believe in property tax relief? You don't need to do that. And so that's a deliberate choice. So we're seeing this time and time again. And the issue is that's not what the people wanted. That's not what the people voted for. And ultimately, we're going to make sure that we continue to do the work that the people of Florida have sent us here to do. You guys can be a part of that by being obviously be polite and everything, but just being very frank with your representatives about what you want to see. Do you want to see Florida build off its success, or do you want to hand a junta in the Florida House to sabotage that success? I think I know where most people are going to come down on that. Thanks, everybody. God bless. Thank you. Good job. Which way? See you later. Hey, thanks so much.